All right. Uh, Good morning, everyone. And thank you for the past couple of days getting through the witnesses for Young Brothers. We will now turn to the consumer advocates witnesses. And I believe Mr. Angelo, you are first up. Mike, can you turn on either one of the mics?
This
Yeah.
one's on.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Right, thank you very much. Mr. Knox, just a reminder, you have 5 minutes for
Thank you.
the rec.
Thank you. Morning, Mr. Angela. Good morning. Did you attend many of the public hearings for this docket? I did. Attended all of them. Where were they? Which ones did you go to? The ones on Oahu, Maui, Hilo, Kauai High on Big Island, and Kauai, and Molokai and Lanai. Did you talk to Young Brothers customers who also attended those hearings? I did. What did those customers say about the proposed rate increase and about the proposed wiki? I'd note that, there was a lot of commentary provided in the docket, which I referred to in my testimony. There were various sentiments provided. In the conversations that I had, I noted there was a lot of concern regarding the rate increase. And there was a lot of opposition to the rate increase, and there was a lot of general concern over the services. We noted a lot of concern on services, like packages being left on docks, cargo being left on docks. Just for you, did you support considering and analyzing the wiki in this general rate case along with the general rate case, general rate increase? Yes, and it's important to do so because wiki as itself is a rate adjustment mechanism, and rate adjustment mechanisms are only appropriate for certain types of costs. Those are those that are beyond utilities control, that are significant in magnitude and largely unpredictable. Altogether, do you think the Young Brothers' total request for revenues, rates, including the price elasticity of demand adjustment and a wiki, do you think all of that is reasonable? I do not. It's overstated, and the revenue requirement is overstated and too high. The wiki is not an appropriate mechanism. What about just the wiki on its own? Do you think that's reasonable just on its own? No, for reasons that I just mentioned, it's not appropriate. The largest driver, as we learned in the rate case, is labor, and that's arguably a controllable cost. Are you also recommending, possibly as a condition of approval, that the commission open an investigatory docket subsequent to this rate case to look broadly at Young Brothers' operations and finances on a total company basis? Yes, I mean, this is, as we know, in this cycle, this is not the first time we've been at the precipice of extremely financial dire situations, and the entire company operates together. They share assets. It's important that the company, we are able to investigate the entire company to get a better understanding of its overall financial picture and what is driving these continued dire financial situations. In your testimony, do you mention a stakeholder working group as being part of such an investigatory docket? I do, as part of the recommendations. I recommended a working group, but it could be an investigatory docket as well. Okay. Would you please turn to page 10 of your direct testimony? Okay. Did you want to clarify anything in your direct testimony? Yes, on between line 7 and 8, we're starting at 7, Young Brothers regulated and unregulated sides of its business and how it should say business is currently being operated, not unregulated business. That word unregulated should be struck. Okay, thank you. No further direct.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. Mr. Nakashima.
Morning, Mr. Angelo.
Morning, Mr. Nakashima.
Yeah, as the executive director, you have the ultimate decision-making authority for the Consumer Advocate's Office. Is that right?
That's correct.
And even if you have consultants providing an analysis and a recommendation on a position, as the executive director, you still get to decide whether to accept or reject that recommendation. Is that right?
That's correct, but we do rely on our expert witnesses as utilities do as well to inform that decision making.
Understood. And certainly when it comes to matters of policy, you make the call, don't you?
That's correct.
Do you have a copy of your testimony in front of you?
I do.
I just want to confirm, if I can direct you to page 17 of your testimony, your direct testimony.
Okay.
At the top of that page, you state that a contributor to YB's dire financial situation is that it has been incurring increasing costs without concomitant increases in demand for its services. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you believe a utility has a right to recover its reasonable costs?
I do.
Do you agree that if a utility is unable to recover its costs, the utility's ability to provide safe and reliable services could be jeopardized?
Provided those costs were reasonable and prudent, they should have the right to recover those costs, and they could be jeopardized if they are not able to recover those costs.
So when you talk about breaking the cycle on page 17, this is towards the bottom half of that page. You're not suggesting that YB shouldn't be permitted to file for rate cases at all, are you?
I am not.
Of course not. I mean, that would be against the law.
Objection, calls for a legal conclusion.
Do you acknowledge that reasonable rate increases can be necessary to sustain utility service?
I do.
Turn to page 19 of your direct testimony. And I think you just touched on this earlier on direct exam, but on page 19, you start listing your recommendations. And you recommend that the commission open an investigatory proceeding, which includes a stakeholder working group whose charges are to determine workable solutions to decrease the risk to Young Brothers' regulated customers stemming from financial challenges with Young Brothers' total business, and to aggressively seek solutions to become more cost-effective and pass those savings back to the customers. Did I read that correctly?
That's correct.
So do you believe such a stakeholder working group provides an effective process to determine workable solutions?
I believe a process such as an investigatory docket, stakeholder working group is an important aspect. I think a proceeding where a commission has decision-making authority may actually be a better alternative to what I proposed.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part?
So an investigatory proceeding where the commission has decision-making power as opposed to simply a working group may be an even better alternative.
I see. But you do say,
I do say that, yes.
which includes a stakeholder working group in your
Yes,
testimony.
and I'm offering an alternative, yeah.
Now, are you aware that the commission did in fact convene back in 2020 the Hawaii Water Carriers Working Group, a stakeholder working group to determine workable solutions to YB's financial condition? And I think you noted earlier the CA's office did participate in that working group. Is that right?
They did.
Did you read the working group's final report to the legislature?
I did.
Did you read it before forming your position on the wiki in this docket?
I did.
And you understand that the working group recommended wiki.
I do understand that. I also understand the smaller working group report. There wasn't necessarily consensus reached on a rate recommendation. I understand that there were other factors that were considered as part of a wiki, such as performance metrics that would be included, other risk reduction mechanisms that would be appropriate to include, particularly for something that is guaranteed to, or nearly guaranteed to, raise rates on customers on an annual basis.
Mr. Angelo, can you point to me where in that report this consumer advocate expressed those types of objections that clearly stated those objections?
Not directly from the consumer advocate, but within the report itself. Not the wiki report, but the report from the small rates group.
So just to confirm, the consumer advocate's office participated in the working group, and in the
Correct.
final report, there's no clear
There-
objection from the consumer advocate in that report on Wiki.
There is no clear objection from any group in that, and on the wiki in that working group report, in the final report.
There was at least a consensus reached that this should be a recommendation by the working group. Is that right?
That would be my understanding. It wasn't involved directly in the working group. But I would presume so.
Do you agree that we use a Ford test year in Hawaii?
I will defer. I'm not going to get into discussion on the interplay between HRS 271G and 269. I think that's more of a legal matter and it will be addressed in a brief.
Or do you understand which test year we're using in this rate case?
Yes,
Which test year are we using?
forward test year,
Specifically
2025.
2025 test year. So we're not, sorry, just to be clear, we're not using a 2024 test year, are we?
We are not.
And we're not using a 2023 test year,
We are not.
and nor a 2022 test year.
We are not.
Now, on page 5 of your direct testimony, are you there on page 5?
Yes,
Okay. You reference, I think starting on line 4, you reference Mr. Mugrace's adjustments to various types of operating expenses. Is that right?
that's correct.
And do you understand Mr. Mugrace's adjustments to operating expenses?
Yes, but I would defer to him as to the specifics of those adjustments.
And you accepted his recommendation and his analysis.
I did.
So you understand that he's recommending a normalization adjustment to YB's future test year estimates based on a comparison to a historical average. Is that right?
A normalization, yes. Yeah.
And you may recall yesterday we discussed, or Ms. Kishimoto discussed exhibit YB hearing 12. This is the exhibit that compared with columns, it compared YB's test year amounts along with Mr. Mugrace's recommended amounts, followed by a column with the actual annualized expenses. Do you recall that discussion?
Chair, can the witness see that exhibit if we're gonna ask him questions on it? Can we pull that up? Do you have
I
12?
need the reference. What,
Hearing exhibit 12?
yeah, if you could give that, thanks. Kendrick has a
Kendrick
copy.
has a copy.
Extra copy. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes, please.
Okay.
It's your understanding that a copy of this exhibit along with his work papers were provided to your office prior to the hearing. Is that right?
I believe that's the case.
And based on what you see on that exhibit, are YB's actual annualized expenses in 2025 higher than Mr. Mugrace's proposed numbers?
According to the exhibit, yes, they are higher in 2025.
Is there any evidence in the record to suggest that YB's actual annualized expenses as shown on this exhibit are inaccurate?
I would have to defer to our witness who would have reviewed these in detail.
And I just want to make sure I understand. So this, despite having a 2025 test year, which again is intended to be a forward-looking test year, the CA is recommending that the commission adjust the 2025 test year estimates downwards based on the historical normalization average, right?
The adjustment is based on a normalization to get a representative, accurate forecast.
And just to confirm something you said earlier, a utility does have a right to recover its reasonable and prudent costs, right?
Yes.
No further questions.
Commissioner Council.
Questions for this witness?
All right, commissioners. Commissioner Yost.
Good morning, Mr. Angelo. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you, Commissioners.
Good to see you. So just want to do a little bit of follow-up, and you may not have complete answers to this question, but there was discussion in your examination, cross-examination, regarding the recommendations of the working group relating to Wiki. Do you have and you reviewed that full report, right? The Wiki report?
Yes.
Do you recall whether or not there was any discussion in that report regarding potential cons of adopting a wiki?
Yes, I do recall there were cons. Yes.
Do you recall what those were, or any of them?
Exactly off the top of my head, no, but typical cons were shifting risk to ratepayers is of any rate adjustment mechanism.
Are there any other concerns you have? I think you addressed some of these in your direct testimony, but are there any other cons you can think of in your perspective to adopting a wiki?
Transparency of what the cost is intended to recover. Any of these rate adjustment mechanisms, it's a big give to utilities because, as I mentioned, it shifts the risk onto ratepayers and it reduces regulatory lag, which is a big benefit to the utility. And regulatory lag in itself is a mechanism that helps ensure that utilities are acting prudently in their decision making because they're not guaranteed cost recovery. Absent that, there's significantly less regulatory oversight. And in the case of YB, we've seen this repeated, we're at this precipice again, this vicious cycle that we're in. I don't think it's been established that such a mechanism should be granted for that reason, but more so for the reasons that I laid out before. It's just not appropriate because it doesn't align with the three principles that I outlined regarding notably around the uncertainty aspect of the cost, as well as costs that are outside of utilities' control.
And I think you mentioned that it might not align with labor costs. Can you explain that a little more?
It's questionable as to how much control the company has over labor costs. I'll acknowledge that there are collective bargaining agreements in place, but if the company also has non-collective bargaining, regular salaries, they have wages. If the company's in a position where it really cannot control its labor costs, then we have a larger problem here. And we'd have to do something about that. But arguably, a utility should be able to control its labor costs, at least to some degree. And I think we heard some examples of some efforts going on yesterday in Mr. Martin's testimony.
Can you see any advantages to having a wiki for a utility like this?
From the ratepayer's perspective, there's obvious advantages to the utility because it provides them a guaranteed revenue stream, and it bolsters revenues. From the customer's perspective, there's a lot of concern with that. I mean, a financially stable utility is a benefit to customers. There's no doubt about it. But in order to a financially stable utility, that also needs to be a financially responsible utility. And this particular design of this mechanism, as it's proposed, it's not appropriate to recover. It's just not appropriate because the costs are not arguably are arguably predictable.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Angelo.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Kuai.
Mr. Angelo, in reading your direct testimony, do you support wiki as a general concept? Not necessarily with respect to YB, but
I think the goal of Wiki is noble to help stabilize the company. So
Okay.
any goal to stabilize a company, because a regulated utility that, one of the themes that came out in everyone's comments and testimony was how much we rely as a state on Young Brothers, and they do provide a necessary and critical service. And we also heard yesterday how hard working all the employees are. So I would say from Wiki as a goal of stabilizing the utility, yes, I certainly agree with stabilizing the utility.
And I'm just reading your testimony. You indicate on page 6 that it removes an important incentive for Young Brothers to seek additional input and operational efficiencies.
Yes.
Assuming that there are certain metrics, I think you raised metrics before, in place, would you be supportive of Wiki if the commission imposes certain metrics? So it wouldn't necessarily be an automatic adjustment, but only if YB.
I think that metrics are an important guardrail. I would say that we should be more targeted about costs and identifying which costs are indeed outside of utilities' control, if any.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Angelo, I just want to make sure we're all clear in the record on what we're referring to. And, I'll say that it's probably subject to check. So when we talk about the Water Care Working Group report, which is basically from the SR 125,
Yes.
right? That's the one that was submitted to the legislature, or it's at least dated December 1st, 2021, right?
I believe that's correct. Can confirm that. Yes, to December 27th.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah, that's the day it was submitted to the legislature and
Okay.
to the governor. And then, right, Commissioner Yost referred to a wiki report. And my understanding is that is appendix. And you also mentioned that there was reports from smaller groups that were within the working group.
Yes.
So that is appendix C3, which is the rates small group final report. And I believe their status report was dated May 20th, 2021,
Yes.
right?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, and in actuality, that the recommendation for Wiki not only came from the rates small group working small group, but also another accompanying group, another small group, because they, I guess, overlapped. And I'm trying to find who that is right now. Well, mainly from the rates working group, but then there was also a sustainability and profitability small group.
Okay.
All right. With that, I mean, just wanted to make sure that's very clear in the record. I want to go back to page 19 of your direct testimony. And you had this discussion with Young Brothers Council about your recommendations. And I just want to make sure, right? So what you have there on page 19, the first recommendation is to open an investigatory proceeding, which includes a stakeholder working group.
Yes.
And to my understanding, the options would be a separate, just working group,
Yes.
working through these issues, and making recommendations. And I guess a third would be the working group, but then making those recommendations in some docket to be opened by the commission.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other ways we could, in your mind?
Those are all I can think of at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which of them do you prefer?
I think an investigatory docket where we have the ability to look at the total company and understand how it's performing financially, I think is important.
So opening the docket from the outset and then creating
Yes.
working groups or whatever, small
And-
groups or,
And it's important for the public and transparency and decision-making process because that can all be provided and filed within the docket
okay,
in a central repository. Yeah,
okay. That's all the questions I have.
thank you.
Mr. Knox, any redirect?
No redirect.
Mr. Nakashima?
Just a couple questions,
Sure.
Chair. Mr. Angelo, if I heard correctly, I think you said something to the effect of Wiki will provide Young Brothers with a guaranteed revenue stream. Is that
I
what you
said almost or nearly guaranteed, yes.
Isn't the Wiki as proposed, like the tier one of the Wiki mechanism, isn't it tied to the GDPPI?
Annual change in GDPPI, yes.
Right? Does YB control that change or the GDPPI in general?
No, and I'm basing that off historical data. I don't think since 1950 on an annual basis, I'm not sure that it's ever been negative on an annual basis.
So you're just saying right now that since 1950, inflation has always gone up, is that right?
That the GDPPI
Yeah.
index has changed. Yeah.
Right.
That's my understanding.
And the intent of the tier one of the Wiki is to capture some of that up to 5% to help provide measured cost recovery for the utility, but also to provide customers with more predictable, smaller rate increases. Isn't that right?
That's the intent. We would have to have the opportunity to review. I think once an automatic adjustment mechanism is in place that's broadly applied across a number of costs, and there's an expectation that there's going to be a return, those costs are going to be covered by the Wiki, it reduces regulatory oversight and scrutiny of those costs.
But you just testified that the GDPPI has always gone up since 1950. And these are costs, real costs that are being borne by YB. And if we're all interested in making YB's financial situation stable, I don't understand how that doesn't benefit the ratepayer.
We're all interested in making YB's financial situation stable, and we also have a responsibility for regulatory oversight to scrutinize whichever costs are being incurred to ensure that they're reasonable and prudent.
Just to confirm that any increase, and to be clear, while you noted that it's always gone up, in theory, if it were to go down, wouldn't Wiki
On an annual basis since
on
1950.
an annual basis, if it
Or
were to go
around
down
there,
though,
around there. Yeah.
wouldn't Wiki also operate the other way?
You mean if there was a negative or a change in GDPPI?
Yes.
Yes, that is part of the proposal,
So the Wiki mechanism is intended to capture both of that, up and down.
as it's proposed, yes.
But your concern seems to be stemming from the fact that year over year, it always goes up. And that,
I think I was responding to your question. My concern is that the costs, it's a broad inflationary-based mechanism, automatic adjustment mechanism, and automatic adjustment mechanisms need to be tied to costs that are significantly large and beyond the utility's control and unpredictable.
yeah, thank you. No further question.
Right. Any further questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Angelo.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next witness, consumer advocates witness is Dante Mugrace. Apologize if I'm pronouncing that. I know I got the Dante right. I think. Mr. Grace, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Knox, any direct?
Yes, thank you. Morning, Mr. McGrace.
Morning.
And I think they told witnesses before, you don't have to lean all the way in.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Andrew.
It's force of habit. Sorry.
Just to start broadly, what was the scope of your direct testimony?
The scope of my direct testimony is to review Young Brothers' overall revenue requirement proposal, which relate to rate-based valuation, operating revenues, operating expenses, and associated depreciation, amortization, and the flow-through of taxes to set a rates for service going forward.
Thank you. Did you testify on rate of return?
I did not.
But didn't you opine on rate of return and financial risk on page 6 of your testimony?
Can I look at my testimony?
Please.
This question and answer relates to the response that I received in Young Brothers CA 18 discovery request or discovery request, explaining what the company has proposed as far as regulated utility and the rate of return. It's not something that I supported nor did I testify to. It was just something that I paraphrased from the company as far as how they relate rate of return with risk.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sorry if I confused anybody.
Would you like to highlight any parts of your adjusted test year revenue requirement?
Two things that stand out. One is the labor vacancies and the number of employees expected to be employed in the test year 2025, and certain adjustments to the company's operating expenses, cargo, voyage, maintenance, and A&G expenses.
Thank you. What was your proposed adjustment for labor expense related to remaining vacancies?
In the company's response, I believe it was in rebuttal, out of the 5 vacancies, 2 were filled and the employees are in service and they're working. The other 3 are still outstanding. And I believe that the company is expected to hire 3 extra people in the test year 2025.
Would your adjustment include the labor expense for those 3 as of yet unfilled positions?
No, it's unclear as to when Young Brothers is expected to fill in those 3, so it's an unknown. But if the company has any updated information, my recommendation may change.
What were your proposed adjustments to expenses like cargo handling, voyage? I think you mentioned maintenance and A&G.
Administrative in general. My approach to setting rates for service is reviewing operating expenses. And my approach was to look at 3 years and 5 years of actual expenses the company incurred since 2020. I applied the 3-year average because the 5-year average encompassed the COVID period, and that may have skewed results. So I used a 3-year average, which I believe are the normal operating activities of the company from 2022 through 2024. My 10-year variance was set to look at anything that appeared to be abnormal, fluctuating, non-recurring, and based on my 3 years of actual historical expenses, I applied my variance to the company's forecasted expenses, which they used to set rates in this 2025 period. Any increase or decrease in the 10% variance, I applied an adjustment. So if the prior costs were lower and the forecasted test period was higher, I made an adjustment downward. However, if the prior costs were higher and the forecasted period was lower, I increased that cost. So I'm trying to be consistent across all expense activities.
Okay. Sorry, just to clarify, I think you said your 10-year variance. Did you mean 10%?
10%, I'm sorry.
Sure. Let's see. In doing that, were you trying to just switch in actuals from 2024, 2023, or 2022?
No, the company filed their rate case in October 2024, and they used a forecasted 2025 test year period. Using actual course would result in maybe an historical test year, which was not used to set rates for service in this case.
Thank you. What about an alternative approach, like a budgeting approach, just building a forward test year with unique expense levels according to management's information of current situations without any comparison to past averages?
Can you say that again, please?
Sure. What do you think about an alternative approach to these expense categories, such as budgeting by using unique expense levels according to management's information of current situations?
Cost increases and decreases over time, but not proportionally. The company's forecasted period is a point in time that they use to set rates. My normalization approach is a way to show how the commission can look at costs, adjusted growth or adjusted decreases, and I use as a guide to set rates for service based on a reasonable outcome.
Okay, thank you. No further direct.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. Mr. Ono.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mugrace, in your direct testimony concerning the employee vacant positions, you identified 7 vacant positions. Do you recall that?
I did that in my direct testimony, yes.
And that was incorrect.
That was incorrect. In the company's rebuttal, the update was 5. I double counted 2 employees, and I accept there's only 5 employees that the company is expected to hire, 2 of which been hired already.
Okay. And in direct testimony, Mr. Knox asked you about your testimony on page 6. Do you have that in front of you still?
Sorry, let me look. Yes,
Yeah, and the question there is Young Brothers categorized as a typical traditional regulated utility? And then your answer is, in response to CAIR 18, Young Brothers cannot be compared to electric or gas utility companies when developing cost of equity for rate-making purposes. It is important to identify companies that have a comparable business risk, parentheses, companies engaged in similar lines of businesses, close parentheses, to Young Brothers. Young Brothers is primarily engaged in regulated tug and barge shipping operations, and the risks are associated with respect to the service territory and the regulatory environment in which the provider of these services operate in. There is not currently available a large sample of public utility traded regulated tug and barge utilities. While Young Brothers and traditional regulated electric and gas utilities are rate regulated, they operate in fundamentally different lines of business, which makes them an inappropriate comparator to estimate the cost of equity for Young Brothers. Young Brothers may have alternatives to shipping via Young Brothers, whereas electric and gas utilities commonly have a monopoly on their respective service territories. In response to CAIR 18, Section D, Young Brothers' status is a common carrier of property by water authorized under the Hawaii Water Carrier Act and was granted its current operating authority by decision and order number 5682, docket number 3633, dated June 1, 1970. Did I read that correctly?
you did.
Is there anywhere in your direct testimony where you say you disagree with this?
I'm just paraphrasing what the company has provided in CAIR 18. The rate of return that I included in my operating revenue or my operating expenses and rate of return is based on Dr. Pavlovic's recommended rate of return.
The answer to my question is it no? There is nowhere in your direct testimony where you disagree with the testimony you provided on page 6?
I'm rephrasing what the company has proposed in its discovery.
I just want to ask you this question. Is there anywhere in your direct testimony where you say,
It's here.
let me finish the question. Is there anywhere in your direct testimony where you say, I disagree with the statement I just gave on page 6?
No.
Thank you. In doing your analysis, you accepted Young Brothers' allocation factors between total company and intrastate company based upon the recommendations of Pavlovic that were used to develop Young Brothers' overall recommended revenue requirement increase. Is that correct?
Yes,
What does that mean that you accepted the allocation factors between total company and intrastate company based upon the recommendations of Dr. Pavlovic?
I relied on Dr. Pavlovic's recommendation and review of the filing in order to set a rate of return and the allocation factors that he recommended.
Is it your understanding that Dr. Pavlovic determined that the allocation of Young Brothers' operating expenses between interstate and intrastate were fair and reasonable?
I believe he said that, yes.
Do you agree with this statement? Young Brothers has been incurring increased operating expense and capital expenditures without concomitant increases in demand for its services. It is the increase in operating expenses that are the likely driver, and labor expenses are the major driver of Young Brothers' operating expenses.
Excuse me, can you identify where that statement's coming from?
It's a statement. I don't need to identify anything. I'm asking him a question.
I agree with that.
Thank you. Would you base your opinions on Young Brothers' forecasted operating expenses based upon an analysis that provided a rough measure of what is fair and reasonable?
Rough measure.
You don't know what rough measure
It's
means.
like a back of the hand calculation.
Objection,
Back
vague and
down.
ambiguous.
Well, let me ask this. Is rough measure a term of...
Sorry, there's an objection.
I'm asking a different question. Is rough measure a term of art used by rate-making analysts?
Yes. It's like a review, a back of the calculation envelope, a rough estimate, a forecast.
Is rough measure a term of art used by social scientists in conducting an empirical study?
I don't know.
Do you have an opinion on whether it is appropriate for any rate-making analyst to base any opinion on any aspect of a utility's revenue requirement on a rough measure analysis?
I don't know.
Did you do a back-of-the-envelope rough measure analysis of Young Brothers' operating expenses?
No, it was very detailed. It's shown in CA 202.
Now, you rely upon Dr. Pavlovic's opinion for some of your opinions, is that right?
As far as the allocations and the rate of return, yes.
Right. When you talk about rate of return, you're talking about Young Brothers' cost of capital.
Cost of capital,
Yeah, and you don't do cost of capital analysis.
I do not.
Is it typical for a consultant such as yourself to rely upon the opinions of another consultant?
Yes, all time.
And would you rely upon an opinion of another consultant that was based upon a rough measure analysis?
If that's their recommendation, yes.
Let's turn to Dr. Pavlovic's testimony. Do you have that in front of you?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah. We have the copies.
Could you turn to page 29?
Okay,
So I'm referring you to page 29 of Dr. Pavlovic's direct testimony, that's CAT3. And down at line 15, there's a sentence that says, and I'll read it. To get a rough measure of Young Brothers' risk relative to that of the proxy group, I compared the intermodal group's average beta to the betas of 3 publicly traded investor-owned utilities operating in the regulatory environment in Hawaii. do you know what Dr. Pavlovic meant when he did a rough measure of Young Brothers' risk relative to the proxy group?
I do not.
Does rough measure have any meaning to you in this context of measuring relative risk?
As far as the capital structure and rate of return, the answer would be no.
No, staying on the same page, going up to about line 11, there's, and you can read the whole sentence, but I want you to focus on this one phrase and I'll read it. It is an undisputed fact that rate regulated companies have a lower risk than companies that are not rate regulated. Do you see that?
I do.
Any idea who Dr. Pavlovic is referring to when he says it is an undisputed fact? Who are these people that do not have a dispute?
I don't know the answer to that.
Do you agree with this statement that it is an undisputed fact that rate regulated companies have a lower risk than companies that are not rate regulated?
I don't have an opinion on that.
You think there's a little hyperbole in this statement?
I don't know.
I want you to turn to, what? Could we bring up 16605, please? And what exhibit number that is?
I'm sorry, Council, can you restate what we're going to?
Yeah, I'm gonna have Mr. Newgrace take a look at Hawaii Administrative Rule 16-605-31. Yeah, we don't. And this has been
I got it up. Okay.
previously identified as Young Brothers Hearing Exhibit
But-
3, which is in
Hold on,
evidence.
Jeff.
Thank you.
Let's pass that all on it then. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Hawaii Administrative Rule 16-605-31 has been previously identified as YB Hearing Exhibit 3 and is now in evidence. Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
And you see under subparagraph E says the test year for any general rate increase application is, and then it has the dates. Do you see that?
Yes.
And this is the rule that that determines whether this is going to be a future test year or historic test year when a water carrier files a request for a general rate increase.
Objection calls for a legal conclusion.
Yeah, sustain.
Mr. Newgrace, do you know how it is that we arrived at having a future test year for a water carrier?
How to arrive, it's probably based on the statute.
Right. Young Brothers didn't choose a future test year. It was determined by these administrative rules. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion.
Sustain.
Well, let me ask this question. Have you appeared in a jurisdiction where it's the choice of the utility to determine whether they use a future test year or a historic test year?
I believe it's based on whether the commission rules and the regulatory statutes. It could be historic, future, fully projected.
And there are policy reasons for that favor a future test year, isn't that right?
Whatever the regulatory compact or the regulatory principles are in that jurisdiction.
Well, utilities argue for future test years because it reduces regulatory lag. Isn't that correct?
Yes, because they collect their revenues based on a forward-looking test year, which expenses are expected to be recovered and realized in that period.
And one of the reasons utilities don't like historic test years is because if in a jurisdiction where you use a historic test year, it increases regulatory lag. Isn't that right?
It could.
And you personally don't like future test years because you believe that future test years are reliant upon the subjective judgments of the utility personnel. Isn't that correct?
I didn't say I didn't like future test years. I look at the future test year and apply my recommendations based on my estimates and assumptions.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong place. I'll get there. Excuse me. In direct testimony, you state the more reliance on forecasted data, the more subjectivity should be used to determine the estimated proposed test year 2025 period. Was that your testimony?
Sorry, Counselor, can you give the page and line site?
I'm sorry, page 52, line 18 to 20. I'm referring to Mr. Newgrace's direct testimony, CAT2.
What was that line site again, please?
18 to 20.
Thank you.
Okay, let me read this. Okay,
That was your testimony, is that right?
yes,
Then you go on to say there is a measure of interpretation when reviewing forecasted data, and different levels of interpretation can vary among the parties to the proceeding and ultimately determined and included by the commission. You see that?
yes,
That's your testimony.
yes,
Now, one of the things you did was you took a 5-year average when you were normalizing Young Brothers' expenses, right?
a 5-year and a 3-year.
Right, but one of the first things you did was you did a 5-year average. You didn't provide any of the work papers for the 5-year average that you did you?
It could be part of my CA, hold on, CA 202, under column Q. I did a 5-year and a 3-year average. So I
Well,
did the same analysis on the 5-year average as I did on the 3-year average.
Was one of the reasons you rejected a 5-year average because it took Young Brothers' expenses just too low?
It incorporated the COVID period, 2020 and 2021, and I know in that time period, the economy was not in a position, it wasn't a normalized year to look at costs because they fluctuated so much. And there was an anomaly, it's extraordinary expense, unusual in nature, and frequency and occurrence.
So when you,
3-year average. I'm sorry,
No,
3-year
no.
average.
I apologize. I shouldn't step over you like that. So Mr. Newgrace, did the results of your 5-year average produce operating expenses that were significantly lower than the 3-year average?
It depends, because if you look at the costs, they fluctuate over time, and they did increase or decrease in 20 and in 2021. But I didn't believe it was a valid reason to include those 2 years because of the COVID-19. I didn't do an overall adjustment under the 5-year average because I didn't utilize that to set my rates for the service in this case. I utilized the 3-year average.
Yeah, in any event, you rejected the 5-year average and you made a subjective judgment that the 3-year average was more appropriate for Young Brothers.
Yes,
Now, after normalizing Young Brothers' operating expenses using this 10% or greater threshold, did you increase the amount of any of those operating expenses by a factor to account for inflation?
no, because typically the actual cost in 2022 to 2024 should not have included inflation because they were actual costs. If inflation was incorporated into those costs, then I just averaged it out based on the data that I received in CA 202.
Yeah, maybe I confused you. What you did when you took the 3-year average for those expenses that were 10% or greater, you then calculated that average and determined that that was the amount for Young Brothers operating expenses. Is that correct?
Yes,
After you did that, did you then increase that amount for an amount to account for inflation?
I did not.
Did you increase your normalized amount to reflect that operating expenses have historically been increasing with labor costs as the major driver?
Well, I didn't touch labor costs. I didn't average out or normalize labor costs. I've accepted those costs. The only cost that I did average out was the non-labor costs, and I didn't include an inflation factor.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about rate base.
Sure.
Okay. Let's start with ADIT. What is ADIT?
Accumulated deferred income tax. It's a temporary difference between book depreciation and tax depreciation.
Did you have any adjustments to Young Brothers ADIT balance and rate base?
I did not.
Did you determine that they were reasonable and necessary?
Yes, since I didn't make any adjustments to the company's utility plant and service or accumulated depreciation, I did not include any adjustments in the related accumulated deferred income tax balance.
Okay, let's go to cash working capital. You adjusted operating expenses and taxes other than income tax, so you flowed through those adjustments to cash working capital. You then determined a balance of cash working capital at $7,530,940. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And that's on page 29, line 13, if you want to double check.
$7,530,752.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I had the wrong number. 752.
That's in my schedule CAYB 108. On the CA recommended balance, a little higher than the company proposed.
Your cash working capital proposal was slightly higher than Young Brothers. Is that correct?
Yes,
So did you determine that the amount that you determined for cash working capital for Young Brothers, was that reasonable and necessary?
based on the calculations and using the company's methodology to determine cash working capital. Yes, and it's also the adjustment had to do with the interstate allocation piece also.
Okay, let's go to a utility plant and service. I see it as an acronym UPIS sometimes. Is that right?
Yes.
What is utility plant and service?
Utility plant and service is all property, plant, and equipment that the company has invested in to provide safe and adequate property service to the customers.
Okay.
It's the expected value of the property, plant, and equipment that's used to generate the rate of return.
And what does Young Brothers utility plant and service consist of?
I have to go look at the company's filings.
It's fine.
Mr. Burgess, before you respond, can you at least give a citation to what you're looking at?
I'm looking at the company's as filed Schedule G01 and Schedule G03, which is the jurisdictional allocation of rate base to the test year, December 31st, 2025. Okay, the rate base has to do with property and equipment, vessels, asset leasing, dry docks, terminal property equipment, other shipping property and equipment, other shipping and property and equipment. So it's total property and equipment. And that's the development of the company's utility plant and service.
For Young Brothers Utility Plant and Service, did it include all of Young Brothers tugs, barges, and shoreside equipment?
According to Schedule G03, whatever information is on here, property and equipment, that includes all of the company's used and useful plant and equipment.
And that would include the tugs and barges, is that
Yes.
fair? And the shoreside equipment? The lifts,
Yes, it's line 1 through 10.
reefers, containers, all of that would be part of Young Brothers Utility Plant and Service,
Yeah.
correct? Now, other than for the Hokuloa, which you weren't clear as to how Young Brothers would handle the sale, you accepted Young Brothers Utility Plant and Service at a total of $190 million, $524,518. Is that correct? And that's on T2, page 19 of your testimony.
Sorry, Council, you're referring to line 5 on page
Yeah,
19.
1 through 8.
Thank you.
$190, $524, $518.
And that was a number that Young Brothers had determined. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And in doing your analysis of Young Brothers Utility Plant and Service, did you determine that the assets were used and useful?
Through discovery and the company's testimony of certain witnesses, yes.
And you also determined that the assets were reasonable and necessary. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll move on to depreciation. Since you did not adjust Young Brothers Utility Plant and Service, you did not have any adjustments to depreciation expense. Is that correct?
I did not.
Young Brothers depreciation expense is reasonable and necessary?
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Ono. Commissioner Council.
For this witness. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioners. All right, thank you, Mr. McGrace. Well, actually, Eddie, read the,
No redirect.
thank you.
Chair, can we take a break before we bring the next witness? in?
Sure. 10 minutes?
10 minutes, please. Thank you.
All right, back from recess. And we leave the consumer advocate's final witness, Carl Pavlovic. Dr. Pavlovic, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Knox, any direct?
Yes, please. Good morning, Dr. Pavlik.
Good morning, Mickey.
Just to start, is there a correction you'd like to make to your amended DT on page 32?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Would you please turn to that page and explain the correction?
So it's on page 32. And I'm embarrassed. This is actually kind of a mess. I'm not sure where to start. I think I'll start with footnote 45. And footnote 45 should say CAIR 46 rather than 2. Attachment 1, page 199. But wait, there's more. If you go to line 7, say, I agree that the actual capital structure of Young Brothers, which is, what I say is 47.5%, but based on the proper reference to it's a balance sheet. The answer is it should be 48.1, not 47.2. And for debt, and for equity, it should be 51.9, 52.5. Now, that's not a tremendous change. And in any event, it doesn't affect it because what I actually recommend is to round their actual capital structure to 48% debt and 52% equity. And I stand with that recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And just to reiterate, did you say that your ultimately recommended rate of return is not changed by this calculation, correct?
It's not changed.
And can you explain again one more time why that is?
Well, because I was calculating their actual capital structure from the balance sheet it's the total balance sheet for 2024. But then I just round it from 48.1 for my recommendation to a simple 48.
Okay.
And I round the 51.2 of 51.9 up to 52.
Okay. Is there anything else from your testimony on rate of return that you'd like to highlight?
I think the most important thing in terms of my rate of return analysis and recommendation is that I don't accept basically that without adjustment, proxy groups based on unregulated companies should be used with regard to Young Brothers. And I think the risk is less, and I'm quite clear on why I think the risk is less. The risk is less because all 3 of Dr. Vladson's proxy groups are unregulated companies. And they have a much greater risk precisely because they're in a competitive marketplace in terms of their rates or the rates that they charge. Whereas Young Brothers is a regulated utility and it has much less risk than any of the proxy groups.
Yeah. Thank you. From Young Brothers' balance sheet, what sorts of liabilities did you count or not count to build out your debt to equity ratio for Young Brothers?
The balance sheet is not real clear on what it has in terms of what the composition of liabilities is. For current liabilities, I used the line that says other current liabilities. And for non-current liabilities, or as a substitute for for long-term debt, I took current liabilities. No, non-current liability, the line non-current liabilities. I can be clear about this if everybody would refer to Dr. Vladson's exhibit. It is for exhibit RT 603. What I was using is the column, the 2024 column. She does on this exhibit, she tries to do an averaging of the 2023 balance sheet and the 2024, but I'm just using the 2024. If you look at up at the top, unfortunately, these aren't well, the lines are alphabetized. For current liabilities, the line A is 16.8 million. I didn't include that. B is empty. Line C is accrued taxes payable. It's 369,077. I didn't use that. Line D, other current liabilities, is 27.9 million. That is what I used.
Okay.
Then you go down to other long-term liabilities. Long-term debt, and I've never really understood why, because it seems to me that they have a great deal of long-term debt, but the long-term debt line is empty. Then the line J, other non-current liabilities, is 113 million. I used that
Okay.
for calculating debt-like liabilities.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pavlovic. We're done with direct.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Pavlovic, you have a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you minor in any other degree as an undergraduate?
No, I didn't have a minor. I would say that I loaded my undergraduate curriculum with math and science.
Okay. You studied at Karl Ruprecht University in Heidelberg, Germany?
Yes,
Is that
that's
correct?
correct.
And you studied philosophy there, is that right?
That's correct.
Did you obtain a degree?
No,
Then you attended Purdue University and received a master's degree and a PhD from Purdue, is that right?
that's correct.
And all of that was in philosophy, is that correct?
That's correct.
You have no degree in economics?
No, I have no degree in economics.
Do you have any degree from any business college?
No,
Do you have a degree in finance?
no,
A degree in accounting?
no.
You did some teaching after you graduated. You taught at the University of Florida at Gainesville, is that right?
That's correct.
You held a professor's position at the University of Florida, Gainesville from 1978 to 1983.
Yeah, I was an assistant professor.
Yeah, and you were an associate professor of philosophy, is that correct?
I was an assistant professor.
Of philosophy.
I had a joint appointment in philosophy and civil engineering.
Okay. And from 1982 to 1983, you also held an associate director's position at the University of Florida in the Center for Applied Philosophy.
That's correct.
Are you a surfer?
No, I am not.
No.
I do not belong to that cartel.
So you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
The Society of Utility and Regulatory Financial Analysts.
That's correct.
You ever work for a credit reporting agency?
No,
Have you published any articles on cost of capital analysis in any peer-reviewed journal?
no,
Have you published any article or have you ever published any article on regulatory financial analysis in any peer-reviewed journal?
no,
Have you authored any textbooks in the field of cost of capital analysis?
no,
Have you served as an editor for any textbook that covered the field of cost of capital analysis?
no.
Okay, I want you to take a look at what we've had marked as YB Exhibit 13. And we're having it passed out. It's three pages. Do you have all the pages? Just 3 pages. I'm sorry, we have a technical problem. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give him my copy.
Oh, you want us to
We
make,
can we can
copy?
make copies.
Yeah, why don't we take a 5-minute recess? Okay, back from recess. Mr. Ono, you want to proceed?
Thank you, Chair, and I do apologize for the mix-up with the exhibit. Dr. Pavlovic, you have before you YB Exhibit 13. Do you see that?
I do.
And,
Yes,
and there are 3 pages. You see that?
yes, I see that.
And we've stipulated these 3 pages into evidence, and I'll represent to you, these pages came from your website.
That's correct.
And do you recognize it as the most current web pages from your website?
Yeah, I'm sure it's the most current. I'm sure it's what's up there now.
Okay. PCMG is your business, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're a partner in that business with,
No, I'm not a partner. It's a single member LLC, and I am the owner.
what, your website identifies 3 consultants, yourself, Mr. Mugrace, and Dr. Marlon Griffin, correct?
That's correct. They're my colleagues.
I'm sorry, how did you identify them?
Pardon?
How did you identify them? They're your,
They're my colleagues in the
Colleagues.
firm.
Okay.
Or Dr. Griffin is no longer. He had to retire suddenly for health reasons in March of this year.
yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. But in any event, Dr. Griffin, on his profile, you see the description he gives?
Yeah. Yes.
Around in the middle of the paragraph under Dr. Griffin, it says, he primarily has addressed the cost of capital for electric, natural gas, and water utilities in general rate cases. You see that?
Yes,
And Dr. Griffin holds a PhD in economics.
that's correct.
And let's flip to your profile. Is there anywhere on your profile page where you mention that you are an expert in the field of cost of capital analysis?
No, there isn't,
Okay.
because I don't hold myself out as an expert in cost of capital.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you even submitted testimony in this docket where you admit to no cost of capital analysis in your specific duties at PCMG and Associates. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure that is.
Well, let's go to your
You-
direct
you-
testimony.
Piece of my testimony.
Sure, let's go to your direct testimony. Page 1. You see at line 8, there's a question, what is your present occupation?
Yes,
Okay, and then in the second sentence, it says PCMG's business is primarily focused on providing expert analysis and testimony regarding revenue requirement, cost of capital, allocated cost of service, and rate design in federal and state regulatory proceedings for electric, gas, water, and wastewater utilities. Then you go on to say, and I'll read the next sentence, my specific responsibilities encompass utility least cost planning, integrated resource planning, service reliability, jurisdictional and class cost of service studies, rate design, accelerated infrastructure replacement, performance-based rate making, and regulatory policy. You see that?
yes,
And nowhere do you mention cost of capital analysis. Isn't that correct?
that's correct. Those are my general responsibilities.
Now, you reviewed Dr. Villadsen's testimony and her resume. Is that correct?
Yes, I've seen her resume before.
Yeah, it's not the first time you've reviewed an analysis by Dr. Villadsen. Is that fair?
No, I think that that's the first time that I have actually. I mean, I've seen her resume before. I've reviewed her testimony in California, but I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, just, do you remember the 2020 test year rate case for Young Brothers?
Oh, that's correct. You're correct. You're correct.
Will you admit that Dr. Villotson is qualified as an expert in the field of cost of capital analysis?
Oh, yes.
No question in your mind.
No question in my mind.
Do you know do you know Mr. David St. Amon?
No, only by reputation and his testimony.
Well, you had no objection to Mr. David St. Amon's selection of the comparable companies. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Except that they're all unregulated. Which is an important point to note, but it isn't a reason to reject them.
Your methodology at arriving at the recommended allowable rate of return for Young Brothers was first to analyze Dr. Villotson's cost of capital analysis, correct?
Yes, I analyzed the three pieces of her cost of capital analysis.
And you,
Her ROE analysis, her cost of debt, and her capital structure.
you do not question Dr. Villotson's selection of the companies included in the three proxy groups that she used.
No, I do not.
Okay. Dr. Villotson used two financial models to determine Young Brothers' return on equity, correct?
That's correct.
She used the capital asset pricing model and the discounted cash flow model, correct?
Yeah, she applied the DCF to her railroad proxy group and to her intermodal rock proxy group. She did not apply it to her maritime proxy group.
Well, are these generally accepted financial models used by cost of capital consultants in determining a regulated utilities allowable rate of return?
Absolutely.
Did you use any financial models in coming to your recommended rate of return for Young Brothers?
No, I don't do financial modeling for ROE.
You did not do a capital asset pricing model, CAPM,
No,
correct?
I accepted Dr. Volodson's CAPM.
And you did not do your own discounted cash flow model?
No, I did not. After reviewing and actually knowing what I know about Dr. Volodson, I don't have any specific objections to her particular interpretation of the CAPM and the DCF model.
Yeah, and there are other financial models other than CAPM and DCF that cost of capital analysts use in determining a utility's allowable rate of return. Is that correct?
Some do and some don't.
Yeah. Did you rely on any other financial model other than Dr. Villotson's capital asset pricing model and DCF?
No,
Now, in your analysis, you rely on Dr. Villotson's calculation of ROE results for the proxy group, including what you call the overall reasonable range of 12% to 15.5%. Is that right?
yeah, that was a range that she showed in her exhibit. There she showed a great many reasonable ranges, and I tried to distinguish them into CAPM reasonable ranges, DCF reasonable ranges, maritime reasonable ranges, railroad reasonable ranges, intermodal company reasonable ranges, and then there was an overall that, encompassed all the others. And that's the one that I called overall.
Why don't you turn to page 27 of your direct testimony, that's CAT 3.
Yes, I am there.
You see in figure 1, it says summary of ROE results at 60% equity capital structure. Do you see that?
Yeah, yes,
And then in figure 1, you have 4 columns: maritime sample, railroad sample, intermodal transport sample, and then you have reasonable range. You see that?
yeah, I don't have those. This is Dr. Volodson's table from her testimony.
Right. And you accepted Dr. Villadsen's determination of the overall reasonable range, which is found in the last column. Is that correct?
No, I suggested using the intermodal reasonable range, I believe.
Right. So you ended up accepting Dr. Villadsen's reasonable range at 12 to 15.5%. Isn't that right?
No, she uses that in expressing what her results are. No, I accepted the intermodal transport sample reasonable range encompassing both CAPM and DCF. That is 11.75 to 14.5 before adjustment for risk.
Well, let me ask this. Without Dr. Villadsen's reasonable range of ROEs, you wouldn't be able to provide any recommended range of rate of return for Young Brothers. Isn't that right?
Yeah, without being able to rely on that. That's correct.
And then you note that Dr. Villadsen placed Young Brothers' allowable rate of return at 13.75%.
Yes, which she characterizes as the upper end of her maritime reasonable range. And then, if I correctly recall, if I haven't misstated here, she also says, well, that falls in the upper end of the overall reasonable range as well.
Well, your testimony is that 13.75% is above the midpoint of the overall reasonable range of 12 to 15.5%.
That's her testimony.
Well,
But I accept that. I mean, that's where she's placing it.
well, 13.75% is the exact midpoint of between 12 and 15.5%. Isn't that right?
It's possible to have to sit here and do the calculation.
15.5.
But she characterizes it as above the midpoint. I can't resolve this for you. Probably Dr. Villadsen could.
Without doing your own CAPM and DCF, in order to disagree with Dr. Villadsen's selection of 13.75% as the ROE for Young Brothers, you make a determination as to whether Young Brothers has less financial risk than the proxy group just by virtue of being regulated. Is that correct?
Well, any utility has four types of risk. It's market or systematic risk, which is what is supposed to be measured in the ROE, by the ROE models. Then there's financial, business, and regulatory risk, which is presumed, and I have testified a number of times in California, is wholly accounted for in the credit ratings of either a utility, well, everywhere else, we're talking about proxy groups that are made up of utility companies. And you're talking about a utility that also has a bond rating, a utility bond rating.
In order to make your determination of a reasonable rate of return for Young Brothers, you start with the conclusion that it is an undisputed fact that rate-regulated companies have a lower risk than companies that are not rate-regulated.
That's correct.
And you provided no support for that statement in your direct testimony. Is that correct?
No. That statement is based on my experience in many cost regulatory rate proceedings, which encompassed I'm sorry, which encompassed, among other things, cost of capital. And I have never seen anybody dispute. I've never seen any cost of capital witness dispute that unregulated companies have a higher risk than regulated companies. I mean, and I can go on about that. I mean, you know, Young Brothers is regulated because it's a monopoly franchise granted by the commission. It's not subject to any effective competition. There's nobody else that can come in and say, I'm going to offer to move intra-island within Hawaii cargo. So they don't have any competition. And if I correctly remember Dr. Vladson's rebuttal testimony, I would say that the Hawaii Commission is what cost of capital or credit rating companies call pretty supportive or supportive. That is, it makes decisions that are based on equally taking into consideration lenders' interests and shareholders' interests. Anytime YB has a problem, a financial or otherwise problem, they can come to the commission and ask for rate relief. And the commission gives them rate relief. They may not give them every rate relief. Unregulated companies do not have that option.
Right. Well, unregulated companies can change their price without having to go to a commission to change pricing. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's true.
Now, my question was actually much simpler. I asked you, you provided no support for your statement that it is an undisputed fact that rate-regulated companies have a lower risk than companies that are not rate-regulated.
Yeah, that's my testimony, and I have never seen anyone dispute that.
Well, did you hear Dr. Villotson testify a couple of days ago that she disagrees with that statement?
No, I did not hear her testimony here.
So if Dr. Villotson says she disagrees that it is an undisputed fact that rate-regulated companies have a lower risk than companies that are not rate-regulated, that makes your statement false, isn't that right?
No, it just makes her believe that there's... Really, Mr. Ono? No, it doesn't make my statement false. It just makes my statement an expression of my experience and opinion in this matter.
Okay. Well, you then embark on an attempt to show that Young Brothers has less risk than the proxy group you compared, or that Dr. Villotson compared to the intermodal proxy group's average beta. Let me start that again. You attempt to show that Young Brothers has less risk than the proxy group. Isn't that right?
Well, I cite to a marker that can be taken, to betas, that can be taken as a relative measure of a rough relative measure of risk.
And you admit that what you were doing was a rough measure. Is that right?
That's correct.
Is rough measure a term of art used by cost of capital analysts in calculating a utility's allowable rate of return?
I'm trying to think if I've ever seen it in the cost of capital, but it is a very typical, it's a term of art amongst the regulatory analysts, that's for sure. There are lots of rules of thumb or rough measures that people cite to upon occasion.
What you're attempting to prove is that regulated utilities have less risk than unregulated companies that operate a business very similar to the regulated utilities. Isn't that correct?
I'm not trying to prove it with beta. I'm using the beta as an illustration of the fact.
What is an empirical study?
I'm sorry.
What is an empirical study? You're a social scientist. Have you ever heard of an empirical study?
I'm not a social scientist. I'm a philosophy a PhD philosophy with what is actually a concentration throughout the 7 years of higher education on epistemology. And epistemology tries to answer the question, what do you know and how do you know it?
Well, would you agree with this definition? An empirical study is a study based on direct observation, experimentation, and evidence gathered through systemic research methods rather than purely theoretical reasoning or philosophical principle.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%.
Was your attempt to determine whether rate-regulated companies that have less risk than unregulated companies, would you call that an empirical study?
No, that's based on observation over about 40 years of many logistical companies of different kinds. And I said, and one of the indications is that betas tend to be higher for unregulated companies than they are for regulated companies.
Well, could you design an empirical study to determine whether rate-regulated companies have less financial risk than unregulated companies in the same industry?
Yes, I probably could. I don't know if the CA has the budget for it, but yes.
Yeah, and again, what you were doing in this rate case is not an empirical study to determine the relative risk of regulated companies compared to unregulated.
So now it's an analysis based on observations and also the recognition that ROE is also just a measure of risk.
So in order to,
It's not a directly observable. You cannot directly observe ROEs.
in order to come to this rough measure of relative risk, what you did was you took the intermodal transportation group and compared it to the betas of 3 regulated utilities in Hawaii. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I did.
And the 3,
As an indication of the relative risk. I didn't say that proves it.
so you were comparing transportation companies against 3 regulated utilities in Hawaii that consisted of Hawaiian Electric, Hawaii American Water Company, and Hawaii Water Service Company, correct?
Yeah, which are all regulated.
None of those 3 regulated companies have anything to do with transportation, correct?
All 3 of those companies operate utility networks delivering something.
Well, are you telling me that transportation of goods are similar to transporting electrons on a transmission line?
You're moving something through a network.
Well, so you think that it's,
They're all network corporations and network operating companies. And there is a vast, I should have quoted it, there is a vast academic literature on the characteristics of network companies.
what did you do? What did you do to control for any confounding factors in trying to determine whether the fact of being rate regulated puts a business less at risk than being regulated?
Oh, I looked at the fact that a rate-regulated business can always come in and ask for a rate increase, even if their demand goes down.
Well,
Unregulated companies do not have that opportunity.
well, isn't a confounding factor an external variable that is linked to the variable that you're trying to test?
Yeah, that's typically what a confounding factor is.
Where in your direct testimony do you identify a single confounding factor in your study of the unregulated intermodal transportation proxy group against your selection of Hawaiian Electric, Hawaii Water, and Hawaii American Water?
I think the answer to that question is there's not, I don't know what possible confounding factors could be, but what I do know is that the factor is that they are regulated. They're all
In any-
regulated, all have the opportunity to have
In any event,
prudent operations, have their fine, basically, the rates raised as a result of prudent actions. I mean, nobody ever gives anybody a rate increase on imprudent actions.
in any event, you use your rough measure to conclude that Young Brothers has less risk as a regulated utility than the intermodal transportation group to select the lowest ROE in the overall reasonable range. Isn't that right?
No, I use that as an illustration of the difference in risk. I mean, you want me to say that I looked at the business endeavor and said that definitely proves that there should be, that the risk is lower, and that's not what I did. I said that's an indication. I mean, as I keep explaining to you, there are lots of things, but primarily the fact that they are regulated by a supportive commission that reduce their risk, and they operate in a non-competitive environment. There's nobody else that can come in and compete for their service. I know that you know, YB is absolutely convinced that there are people taking business away from them, taking volume away from them. But I direct you to the early parts of my testimony where I point out that there's no indication that anybody is taking volume away from Young Brothers.
Well, Dr. Pavlovic, I'm just trying to get to how you determined 12% to be a reasonable ROE for Young Brothers. And the way you went about it is you used Dr. Villidson's reasonable range of ROEs of between 12% and 15.5%, and you pegged her lowest number, 12%. Isn't that right?
No, I did not. I used her intermodal sample reasonable range. And 12% is not the bottom of that range. That range is 11.75% to 14.5%. And actually 12, which was my recommendation, falls, it's the lowest quartile. It falls almost precisely in the middle of the lower range. I didn't go all the way to the bottom.
Is there anywhere in any textbook on utility rate making that endorses the methodology you used in determining Young Brothers' cost of capital?
Determining a reasonable range and then placing the estimated ROE at some point in the range.
Well,
That's what people do.
Well, your methodology uses no financial model. You don't use CAPM.
I'm using Dr. Volodson's financial models.
Well, I'm asking for you to come to a conclusion on Young Brothers' rate of return. You did not do any of your own financial models. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I didn't see anything. I didn't see any problem with Dr. Volodson's.
And is this methodology used by other cost of capital experts in arriving at a utility's cost of capital where you don't do your own CAPM or DCF, but rely on somebody else's?
I've never seen anybody testify on that basis, no.
Yeah,
I have, however, seen cost of capital witnesses, in fact, accept the results. But you're right. I mean, typically, there are a lot of inputs, and that's where costing to each of these models. And the debate goes on forever. Every rate case I've ever been in, some experts came in and said, well, the utilities cost of capital expert here has chosen the wrong inputs to the model. And then the utility cost of capital witness says, no, it's the interveners that, and, you know, this sort of goes on all the time. Also, I have never been in the cost of capital. I've never been in a rate proceeding where the commission said, oh, that's right, we take the results of this particular model, CAP-M, there are a couple others to the DCF, and say, applied this way by this expert, this is the model, it gives the answer that we accept as an ROE. I've never seen a commission not say, yes, thank you very much, that's very interesting, we'll take all these divergent views into consideration, and then we will make our own determination of what the appropriate ROE is.
I want to next show you YB hearing Exhibit 5. And we're going to have that passed out.
Pull it up. See how the connection's doing. There it is. Don't need it for things running.
Have anything? Okay. Let me just show you this document. Are you familiar with Exhibit 5?
No, but I am familiar with this USAOA project. I was asked to work, but I declined on the cost allocation manual that was prepared for USAID.
So you've never seen that document before?
Well, I've seen it because, yeah, I saw that you designated it as a document, as a hearing exhibit. So, I mean, I've gone over this, but
You've read through it?
More skimmed it.
Exhibit 5 is a manual on cost of capital analysis. Isn't that fair?
Yeah.
And it's for, it's meant to be to apply internationally.
Yeah, that's correct. The NARUC has been involved in this project for a number of years.
No, that's all I have on that. Thank you. Yeah, per our stipulation, YB exhibit hearing 5 is now in evidence. Is that correct, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oops. Yeah, it was used. You did ask a question or two. Okay.
Let's change topic, Dr.
Okay.
Pavlovic. Let's talk about YB BIP.
All right.
You're familiar with YB BIP?
I'm pretty familiar, having been forced to go on a number of tours of your operation. Yes, I'm very familiar with Young Brothers and YB BIP.
Sure. We spent, what, 3 years litigating the jurisdictional cost of service model? Isn't that right?
Yeah, it was probably 3 years. I think I came in at 1.5 years.
And YB BIP is the jurisdictional cost of service model that the commission adopted in that cost of service docket. Isn't that right?
You're talking about 2020-135?
Yes.
No, I don't think that it did adopt it as a cost of service model. It adopted it as a rate design, an aid to rate design.
Right, and you agree that the consumer advocate stipulated with Young Brothers that YB BIP was appropriate to use as the jurisdictional cost allocation model for rate design purposes.
Well, I agreed that there's a lot of data and some calculations in YB BIP that are appropriate for approaching rate design.
And you agree that the application of YB BIP allocators to the 2025 test year revenue requirement is likely appropriately identifying and allocating the portions of Young Brothers' common assets and operating expenses that are used to provide service under the public tariff and off-tariff contracts. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe I said that somewhere in my testimony.
Yeah, you want to take a look at it?
No?
Okay.
Do you want me to look at it?
No, we don't need to look at it. What does that mean, identifying and allocating?
Okay, I guess I better look at it. What are you looking at?
Page 37, line 11. And this is for the record, CAT3, page 37, and the question appears on line 9.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is well, what I would really say, I think I say somewhere else, it does a reasonably accurate job of identifying and allocating plant assets and operating expenses. That is voyage, cargo handling, administrative, and maintenance. Yeah, although it doesn't do a very good job of that because in the revenue requirement, they're not actually voyage expenses are okay, although all of the maintenance expenses in YB BIP are assigned to various functions. In the revenue requirement, the maintenance expenses are pulled out. It's also true that depreciation expense is distributed amongst the functions, whereas in the revenue requirement, depreciation expenses is a separate line item. But that said, my testimony remains that when it comes to allocating plant and operating expenses, it does a reasonably accurate job now of distinguishing between public tariff plant and contract CCA and plant, and between public tariff operating expenses and CCA expenses. That is my testimony, yeah.
Young Brothers is not asking for 100% of its capital investment for the entire company to be included in rate base. Isn't that right?
In the revenue requirement? No.
So when you say that the application of YB BIP allocators to YB's common assets, you're referring to rate base. Is that right?
I'm referring to assets, planned assets. The planned assets are, I'd have to take a look exactly because I haven't paid a lot of attention to the revenue requirement side of this, but I think there are other rate-based items. You know, there are other items in rate base other than just planned.
Well, when you discuss identifying and allocating the portions of YB's common assets, that's a reference to rate base items.
I'm sorry, can you
It's a
rephrase that
rep-
as a question?
It's a
When you-
reference to what YB BIP does, that it takes plant assets and distributes a portion to both contract or contract CCA and public tariff. I mean, that's just what it does.
Right, and that allocation of those common assets, that's what goes into Young Brothers' rate base for revenue requirement
Yeah,
purposes.
for revenue requirements, that's right.
Okay.
The revenue requirement doesn't cover total company operations, just the what they believe is a proper allocation to the public tariff operation.
YB BIP allocated approximately 45% of vessels and barges to regulated rate base. Isn't that correct?
I think that's right. I'd have to go take a look at what the allocators are and report 1,500 for the YB BIP 2025.
Yeah, and you have no issue with that 45% or regulated for vessels and barges with 55% being allocated to interstate. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, no, I don't have any, I don't have any quarrel with those allocators. I'm not sure that they're being totally properly applied over in the revenue requirement model, but no, I don't have any reason to doubt that those aren't reasonably accurate.
And when you say that the application of YB BIP is appropriately identifying and allocating the portions of YB's operating expenses, you're saying that there's no appropriate cost shift from interstate operating expenses to intrastate operating expenses. Isn't that correct?
Oh, that's correct. Right. And I have never said anything else than that.
And that includes all of Young Brothers' total costs, including overtime, double overtime, and triple overtime. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah, the labor expense that's represented by not just regular, straight time pay, but double, triple. Maybe there's a quadruple, I'm not sure. Overtime.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mission Council, any questions?
Yes, thank you.
Commissioners?
We do
Maybe
have,
redirect.
we have
Mr.
just a
Knox.
little bit of redirect.
Sure.
Thank you. Dr. Pavlik, at one point you were being crossed about your website. And I believe you said, I don't hold myself out as an expert on cost of capital. I just wanted to clarify, are you testifying for the consumer advocate as an expert witness on several aspects of this docket, including but not limited to cost of capital?
Yes, I am testifying.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with cost of capital analysis and testimony?
For most of my career, I have participated as an expert in regulated rate proceedings. Usually as a cost of capital, I'm sorry, usually as a cost allocation and rate design expert. In order to do that, I have to work closely with all the other experts. That is the cost of capital, the depreciation, and the revenue requirement. And for most of the time that Dr. Griffin was one of my colleagues in PCMG, we collaborated on, what Dr. Griffin was doing in his testimony and his analyses and why he chose to do the analysis that he did and why he rejected certain certain ROE models and why he accepted certain others, et cetera. In the last 6 years, Dr. Griffin and I actually both offered witness testimony in the California cost of capital cycle. They have a 3-year cost of capital cycle. I have participated as a witness primarily with regard to the financial, regulatory, and business risks that I was talking earlier. All of those were with Dr. Griffin. There have been 3 normal in that time period. So every 3 years, California does this. Every 3, and then they have the possibility of doing what's called an off cycle, and they did that in 2022. So I participated in 4 as a witness, mostly with regard to various financial, business, and regulatory risks in California. As I told Mr. Owner earlier, for many, many years, I've observed, among other things, the cost of capital battles.
So would you say between knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education, you at least have knowledge, skill, and experience in cost of capital?
Yeah, in certain aspects, yes, I would.
Okay, thank you. No further redirect.
Just one quick recross. Dr. Pavlovic, your recommended rate of return for Young Brothers, that's an opinion, isn't that right?
Yeah, it's an opinion formed on the basis of the evidence provided by both me and Dr. Velasquez, yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right. Oh. No? Okay.
Yep.
I'm just gonna ask, make sure that both sides are resting their case.
Yes.
Yes, the rest okay?
Right. Let's take a 5-minute break before we go into closing statements.
Chair, could we get at least 10?
10, sure. And then we're gonna start with the consumer advocate, and then Mr. Ono, you get the last say.
Thank you.
Recess. All right. Back from recess. Dr. Pavlik, thank you for testifying. So we'll begin with closing statements. Each party will have 10 minutes to make a closing statement. And we'll start with the consumer advocate, Mr. Knox.
Thank you. To the commissioners, commission counsel and staff, and Young Brothers counsel and officers and consultants, thank you all so much for coming together for this hearing and expending so much time and effort to consider Young Brothers' request. Commissioners, in my opening statement, I advised you that we need to help Young Brothers because it is not clear that Young Brothers knows how to best help itself. But after these 4 days of testimony, we've learned a lot, and I'm a little more optimistic. It was encouraging to hear efforts by witness Martin about what he has done to address overtime costs and his thoughts on ways to continue to find new opportunities to reduce labor costs. Okay, and I think we were all drawn in by his obvious deep respect for Young Brothers employees' hard work and their dedication. That said, the consumer advocate still has concerns about the same core issues for this rate case. Young Brothers still does not seem to understand the cycle of crisis that it is in, and its primary proposal is to significantly raise rates. That continues to place more financial risk onto already burdened ratepayers. In short, Young Brothers can't figure out what to do as a company about how to break the cycle. Instead, Young Brothers is reaching and grasping for too much. Young Brothers is requesting more revenue they can justify. Young Brothers is trying to lock in abnormally high operating expenses right now, and is trying to justify a very high rate of return based on a cherry-picked proxy group of benchmark companies. Young Brothers is also seeking a very large increase in LCL rates. And yes, a cost causative principle argues for some larger increase in LCL rates above other rates. But public interest and equity considerations, particularly for the smallest neighbor island communities and the everyday customer, will all depend on this service being available and affordable and cost effective, argue for a more moderate increase in LCL rates. Additionally, on top of Young Brothers' proposed rate design is requesting even higher rates to theoretically account for price elasticity of demand effects. However, it's a variety of macroeconomic and different microeconomic factors that affect cargo volumes. Price is just one of those factors. Young Brothers expresses perfect confidence in its econometric modeling, but the signal is not clear. This proposal risks significant overcollection in revenues from its customers. Young Brothers' request for a wiki has been around longer. It is variously offered as some smoothing and spreading for what it believes are inevitably rising prices, a way to stabilize Young Brothers' financial condition, but apparently not to positively affect its cost of capital any. And it believes it's a cure to regulatory lag, which apparently is just a waste of time that it takes to seek approval for its rate increases. The consumer advocate might say that an automatic cost adjustment mechanism like the wiki, now not one tied to any significant major cost driver outside of management control, like say fuel costs, because YB already has a fuel cost adjustment mechanism. No, the consumer advocate might say then this automatic cost adjustment mechanism, just vaguely linked to general inflation, could be unjustly relieving Young Brothers of its legal burden to justify rate increases in rate cases. Young Brothers has said it still expects on top of any wiki. But then Young Brothers might retort that is adrift in a sea of rising costs, just carried along in an increasing cost environment, and that a wiki is needed just so they can stay afloat. But here's where I come back to my optimism. I believe that Young Brothers doesn't have to just drift. I believe that Young Brothers has a motor and a propeller. Young Brothers can sail into the waves. But it needs the commission's hand on the rudder. It needs the commission to keep an eye on the horizon and give it direction. After a moderate and reasonable rate increase, without the distractions of the price elasticity scheme or the wiki, Young Brothers needs a non-rate case docket where we can all take stock of the full scope of the company's operations, what plans and documents are already available, such as disparate sailing studies, the audit, strategic plans, business plans. And we can investigate what's possible with new studies and new ideas, market studies, changes in operations, financial changes in sailing schedules. All of this in the name of providing utility service that we all depend on for safe and reliable transportation of goods in the most cost-effective manner. There is a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. Mr. Ono.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Credibility matters in these proceedings. It has to matter. Otherwise, why do we bother with evidentiary hearings? You have all the direct testimonies, the rebuttals, you have hundreds of IR responses, maybe into the 1,000. Everything is in evidence, and you'll see it all summarized in post-hearing briefs. What this hearing is about is the credibility of the witnesses. And I was going to start with Dr. Pavlovic and whether he was or what isn't a cost of capital consultant or expert. But he admitted he's not a cost of capital expert. Rule 702 of the Hawaii Rules of Evidence clearly provides that lay opinion is not allowed in legal proceedings. In order to provide an expert opinion, the expert has to be qualified. Dr. Pavlovic admits he's not a qualified expert. Now, he even admits he was attempting a rough estimate of Young Brothers' financial risk. Rough estimation does not meet any legal standard for presenting expert opinions in any legal proceeding. None of his work in this critical part of the rate case has any credibility. The only credible evidence on Young Brothers' cost of capital, its allowable rate of return, comes from Dr. Willitson. Then there's Dante Mugrace. He says he analyzes and evaluates Young Brothers' forecasted operating expenses for the test year. But does he? No. Instead of analyzing each forecast to determine the accuracy of the forecast by doing something as simple as comparing 2025 actuals against the 2025 test year budget, he gives Young Brothers expenses that are 10% or greater above the prior year a haircut by averaging the actuals from 2022, 2023, and 2024. He's pushed Young Brothers back into a historic test year. He has actual data for over half of 2025, but he doesn't factor any of that in because Mr. Mugrace is litigating a historical test year while the rest of us are trying to analyze a forecasted future test year. But at least Mr. Mugrace tells you why he doesn't like future test years. It's because he feels future test years rely on forecasts that are dependent upon the subjective judgments of the people at Young Brothers. But that's a policy decision he doesn't get to make. The legislature and rulemakers decided that for us by determining that for a water carrier, a request for a general rate increase will be a future forward-looking test year. In doing so, the legislature and rulemakers determined that reducing regulatory lag was more important in rate-setting dockets than the concern for subjectivity involved in forecasting expenses in a future test year. Now, I said this evidentiary hearing is about the credibility of the witnesses. Well, this rate case was built by people like Chris Martin and Ashley Kishimoto. You had a chance to see them. You had a chance to hear them testify. They built the expense budget from the ground up. Now, what does that mean? It means that Chris Martin estimated line by line, item by item, what expenses he knew would be incurred in 2025, including a few $1,000s for lube oil that Mr. Mugrace saw fit to normalize back to 2023 levels. Mr. Martin isn't here to juice the revenue requirement to help the company. He just wants to make sure that Young Brothers can keep its tugs and barges operating efficiently and reliably. Now, what about Ashley Kishimoto? I have a accountant friend who always tells me the numbers never lie. Well, neither does Ashley Kishimoto. Young Brothers' forecasted expenses for 2025 are coming in way below 2025 actuals. That tells you that the forecasts were way too conservative. During cross-examination of Young Brothers witnesses, there were a number of questions on Young Brothers' decision to invest in new assets. Was it a poor financial decision for Salchuk to have invested in the 4 Capenna tugs? Should Young Brothers have operated with old, slow, emission-spewing tugs, which is what the 4 Capennas had replaced? Without fleet replacement, Young Brothers' future indeed would be dim. Was it a bad investment to replace the old Lanai Molokai barge? Without the new Kolohi barge to replace a barge that was well beyond its useful life, Young Brothers would not be able to effectively and efficiently serve Lanai and Molokai. Maybe the consumer advocate doesn't like the modern features on the Kolohi, like ballast control. Ask our friends on Lanai and Molokai whether they want a modern barge to serve their communities. What about the bigger barge Nauru? You heard from both Chris Martin and Ashley Kishimoto. This barge is an integral part of Young Brothers' fleet and is needed to operate efficiently. Consider what Ashley Kishimoto said would happen if Young Brothers was forced to sell the Naulu. Young Brothers would be severely hampered in being able to deliver cargo to the neighbor islands. We also heard a number of questions asking Young Brothers about not being able to control costs. Well, there is no evidence to support that. Young Brothers provided Dr. Ancom's labor efficiency productivity study, where he compared Young Brothers' labor efficiency against 71 companies in the Pacific Maritime Association. No surprise to anybody at Young Brothers. Young Brothers exceeded the performance of the members of the PMA. The ILWU is a no-nonsense, tough-as-nails union. They know how to phase in their negotiations, starting from the West Coast to Hawaii, where Young Brothers CBAs get negotiated last. The West Coast, Matson and Pasha, they set the market price for stevedores, including changes to the manning tables. It's not about Chris Martin not negotiating hard enough against the ILWU. It's what the market will bear. And as Chris Martin testified, and is supported by Dr. Ancom's labor efficiency study, I think Chris Martin is doing a pretty darn good job negotiating the terms of the CBAs and managing YB's operations. Stevedores get paid well for their services. There's no doubt about that. There's no dispute about that. But we've all seen them work. It happens right before our eyes. They are fast, they are efficient, and they are safe. Are these employees that are padding overtime like we hear about in the media about other businesses? No. And how do we know that? Because the commission ordered a management audit. Nowhere did the auditor find overtime abuses. Then after the management audit, there was an independent observer followed Young Brothers for another couple of years. Did the IO uncover stevedores padding hours or claiming OT when none was performed? No. Now I get it. When you look at these labor expenses rising year over year, your gut tells you something must be wrong. But this rate case is not about gut reactions. It's about the evidence. And there is no evidence to indicate that Young Brothers isn't controlling costs. In fact, it's just the opposite. Young Brothers is doing everything it can to control costs, including the Lead, Manage, Contain program that, among other things, is cutting down double overtime and triple overtime. Now, as Mr. Nakashima said in opening statement, this rate case is about supporting Young Brothers as an essential lifeline for the entire state. The state of Hawaii's economy is dependent upon both intrastate and interstate service. And interstate revenue is essential to keep intrastate costs down. The more charters and tug assist and carriage of interstate cargo, all of that will help reduce costs to the intrastate customer. The last point, at 25.75% rate increase, Young Brothers barely earns a rate of return. At 25.1%, it's break even, no rate of return. Young Brothers needs every penny of this rate increase. That's the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ono. Are there any other outstanding matters this time?
Not that I'm aware of.
Another.
Just as a reminder, we're going to have the hearing recorded and transcribed by a court reporter, and it usually takes a few weeks to get that done. And we'll let the parties know when the transcript is available, should you want to purchase a copy. And based on the per-hearing conference order, the next deadline is post-hearing briefs on Friday, October 24th. And I do wish to thank, on behalf of the commission, everyone's participation, all of the witnesses that both parties have brought. We do want to thank Olelo, community media, Uike and Naleo for broadcasting these proceedings. This is something kind of new that the commission is doing, trying to do so that we can reach more of an audience statewide on what we do. And then lastly, to our staff, thank you to ensuring that the proceedings ran as smoothly as they could. So thank you to our staff. With that, we'll stand adjourned on this particular docket. Thank you.